place across the street. But
I feel comfortable in a nerd setting.
Good, good. So do we, unfortunately. But we smell like nerds half the time. Thanks. So you've just entered the field of comics. And what were the choices behind this?
Well, I was an avid comic book collector as a kid and as a teenager, and collected thousands of comics of the classic DC and Marvel brands. And then around the time that I became politically aware and started playing guitar, that's when I stopped collecting comic books. Early on, I was a huge fan of both fantasy-oriented heavy metal and fantasy-oriented comic books.
Sure.
And as the real world set in, as my sort of ideological compass was being set, I put comics down and pursued a career in rock. And it was about 5 years ago when I began to discover that in the interim period, comics have come a very, very long way. And it's now a medium where anything you can say, literature, in music, or in film, you can now say in comics, and even more too. And about 3 years ago, I wrote this. I conceived the story of Orchid, and was looking for the right medium to present it. And I didn't want it to be, I have a lot of friends in the world of film. I see how diluted an idea can become when there are that many cooks in the kitchen. I didn't want to be just another guy with a screenplay. And I didn't have frankly, I didn't have the time to sit down and write a 600-page book. I was really enamored of books like V for Vendetta, Waltz with Bashir, and Red Star. Those were the three first ones that I got into. That made me think Orchid could be a graphic novel. Then the next step was I hounded my good friend Gerard Way, who does the Royal Academy.
Nice.
And I sent him my notes for Orchid. He passed it on to his attachés at Dark Horse, and that relationship was born.
Right on. So we're doing the book at Dark Horse. You're doing the book at Dark Horse. And how did you, when you conceived the book, were you thinking of it in visual terms? Were you thinking of it, as you're fleshing out the story, how were images coming to you at the same time? You had kind of style you wanted to shoot for?
Yeah, I wanted to combine two of my passions. One is that, I grew up on those huge fantasy epics like Dune and like Lord of the Rings, and like Star Wars and The Stand. Those are kind of the four big pillars. But the one thing that all four of those were really missing for me was an element of class consciousness. I always thought, even as a 15-year-old or however old I was when I was reading Lord of the Rings, I always thought that maybe those orc slaves and the vassals in Minas Tirith had more in common with each other than they did with those damn rulers. And that was something that was just absolutely absent from it. So I wanted to take all the excitement and the epic grandeur, the big battles and chases and the cool monsters, but infuse it with a class consciousness in my worldview, and sort of the politics of street terrorism as well. That one of the things that the book turns on very much is, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist.
Sure. That's incredible. I mean, it's great that you were able to look at this world and kind of create it. In film, I work at Pixar with some of the guys that are here, and we kind of call it an immaculate reality, where you kind of flesh out a lot of things that maybe you won't even see in the book, but you kind of need to know that whole world. So to cover the politics, to cover the different class systems, to cover so much of the atmosphere and the aesthetic of it in the writing is really important. It's great that you were conscious of all that at this stage.
One of the things that was important to me to do as well was I wanted the book to contain, in my music, there's two things that I aim for. There's the visceral quality, like something that the reptilian brain responds to, and that makes a mosh pit happen either on a field, at a stadium, or in your mind.
Sure.
And then also the, on the one hand, the visual quality, but also the intellectual quality, or a depth and a weight to the thing, which can give it a timeless nature.
Something immediate and something you can
and some might say, and I've been asked this more than one every day, is like, what business do you have writing comic?
No, I mean, that's actually translates really well to comics, because, the visuals are going to hit somebody right off the bat.
Yeah.
If they see a Shepard Fairey all day covered, they see now who's the artist on the book?
Scott Hepburn is the artist on the book, and it was actually, it took a year to find the right illustrator.
Sure.
A couple of big names in comic illustrators, threw their hats in the ring, but I found that in the world of comics, like in the world of rock band, a good chemistry is important to getting the thing to happen. And while these people were tremendously talented, it felt like the vibe that we had was not the one that was going to make the best work. And Scott, I thought, was fantastic. I think that he's done great work before, but the work that he's doing on Orchid is head and shoulders above anything he's done. We have a great working
I mean, by it being creator-owned too, something that you own and you're invested in, he can probably invest himself in it a lot more because he knows that he can put his heart into it. It's going to be protected by the people behind it.
That's correct.
And that's really what this place is about.
And this is, and just to make this clear, this is something that I'm writing. This is nothing exactly farmed out to anybody to write. This is like I go over every painstaking, as my Dark Horse comrades will attest, like every painstaking detail of every panel and every bit of artwork, every word is something that I'm not just overseeing, but I'm in charge of.
Sure. Well, can you give us a kind of a taste or an overview verbally of what we can expect from the atmosphere of Orchid? Like what the characters are, what's the world like?
Well, I mean, the vibe that I wanted is sort of that juxtaposition of the fantasy epic with the real world politic. Sort of like, Star Wars meets the Battle of Algiers. I don't know if you're familiar.
Oh, I'm familiar with that.
That's the template. And then the main character, Orchid, is a 16-year-old street prostitute who becomes the Spartacus of whores. That's the one sentence pitch. It's in a dystopian future where a second Noah's Ark flood has occurred. The waters have receded. Humans are no longer the top of the food chain. It's no longer the haves and the have-nots either. It's the have-nothings and the have-everythings. And so the masses of folk are trapped between these awful mutated beasts that prey on them on the one hand and the slave traders of the rich and powerful who own the high, dry ground.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So does the dynamic of prostitution change in this kind of
Well, I mean, another question, I've been doing a lot more interviews, but a thoughtful question that has been before is like, how can you write for women? And that there's two subjects that I draw from. The most radical member of the Morello family is my mom, who is, met my dad during the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, and was very much involved in the civil rights struggle here in the United States. She's a very sort of suburban-looking, nice, white high school teacher lady, but she's like has a steel in her spine. And then when I first moved to Los Angeles, the first community, I moved out there completely by myself, and I got no help from the rock world. I got no help from my Ivy League college associates out there. The first community that really accepted me was the world of drug addicts and prostitutes, and they were like opened their warm drug addict and prostitute hearts and accepted someone who didn't really fit in anywhere else. And so I know people, I knew people like working.
It's an incredible backstory, but you probably got so much real life experience from that you can actually, those connections that you made in that experience translate so well to a story like this, and your music to everything. It's a texture that, you're drawing on things that you're drawing on things that are part of your world that a lot of people just have to fake or have stolen from a movie. It's great that you can actually put that in what you're doing.
And a key part of the book, which we haven't talked about, is that I'm scoring each issue of the comic. There's going to be a musical score that's going to be available for free with each issue of the comic.
So what
is the original score?
So will you launch so this will be like a monthly comic?
Monthly comic.
Okay, so each month will a new song?
That's correct. Yeah, with each issue there'll be like some download. I'm not sure the 10 gig. It's downloaded or free streaming for 2 years or something like that when you get the comic.
Great. I'm sure Dark Horse will help us find out how to get that code.
And I've done a lot of scoring. I did scoring on both the Iron Man movies. So I have a bit of experience in that. I wanted to. The inspiration for the scoring though came from I saw an art show a while back called Ashes and Snow. It's a really powerful movie photography show. And the show had a soundtrack. I thought how interesting to have an art show with a soundtrack. I thought you can have soundtracks for a trickster event, or you can have and so that made me start thinking outside the box. And I really wanted to make a powerful instrumental. There's the track that will be free and downloadable. The first issue is a Night Watchman track. It's kind of a big rock song. The other 11 issues, it's all going to be instrumental. Orchestral music created with guitar.
Great. And just out of curiosity, do you, when you're composing for a comic, like with film, there's a rate of speed where they just kind of deliver it. Are you hoping that a reader can maybe listen to this and read it at the same time and maybe
that's a work in progress. Depending on how fast you read, maybe
that's really progressive to try to attempt something like that.
You may have to hit repeat on it several times depending on how fast you read.
That's still pretty cool.
But I want to try to get the sort of the vibe of this new and terrifying world through the. That's one of the things. through my guitar playing for the last 20 years, I've been translating the terrifying world of Midwestern suburbia. Now it's my job to translate the terrifying world of Oregon. So
That's pretty
these
amazing.
tracks.
Well, yeah, I mean, that sounds great. So how long is this series going to be?
It's 12 issues.
So 12 issues, so it'll be a year long. Wow,
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty incredible. And the world's got to be really fleshed out. And you guys are probably pretty far into
Yeah,
the series.
the world was, the story, really 3 years ago, I had the basic arc of the story pretty complete. And then over that time, Scott Hepburn, the illustrator, has been very helpful in kind of whittling, because originally I thought it would be one graphic novel, now it's going to be episodic, so we got, that takes a certain amount of restraint on the part of the writer to...
Now doing that, can you compare that to an album experience in that it would break up like songs? Is it?
I really thought
I bet it could be like a concept album.
I mean, here's like it's while the touchstones that I use are the standard Lord of the Rings. While I was a political science major at Harvard, I studied English literature. I studied African American literature and the literature of the oppressed and folk literature, and those things were very important to me. And that's in my creative DNA as well as a songwriter and now as a comic writer. So I'm also blessed with a tremendous amount of false confidence. Like I will just like, you need me to fly that airplane? Sure.
That's what we're all about.
That'll be fun.
I mean, that's what this place is about. It's encouraging people to do it yourself, encouraging people to control it yourself.
Yeah.
It's just really heartening to see somebody like you do that with something like a comic. When you come from music and considering any number of ways you could have told the story, to pick comics and really put your heart into creating that.
And I put everything. Let me tell you, I want this work to stand shoulder to shoulder with my best work that I've done in music. And I spent a tremendous amount of time laboring over it, fetching over it. And it's something it's a passion project. I've really tapped into that love of comics, and that comics were very formative to me as a kid. I felt really trapped in this arch conservative suburb of Chicago, and it was an escape. It was a way for my mind to go beyond the very narrow parameters that were laid out for me. And so that's something I've really tapped into in this, and all those years as a dungeon master have been pretty. I own that shit too. You might think that it's like it's cool to be raging, but we will roll a friggin' 20-sided die backstage anytime. All those dudes are down with D&D.
That's what I like to do.
The one thing this is my first time being at Comic-Con, the one thing I really appreciate is like, I didn't realize when I was a comic collector and a Dungeons & Dragons player in the 70s and 80s that it was a real fringe activity. I thought it was just things that I loved and things that I liked. I thought, how odd that I'm not getting dates. I didn't connect the two. Then I got the electric guitar.
Seems to have worked out. Yeah.
I like the fact that now comics have gotten even more extreme in a way, and more uncompromising in a way that they were then, and yet the mainstream has moved to them. I mean, look at Comic-Con. It's now every film, every video game that comes here and panders.
They're pandering too.
Geeks. And that's pretty cool.
That's pretty incredible. It's incredible to hear about the gaming background, because that stuff really is a form of storytelling. At a really young age, it's like playing. I'm a big proponent of becoming a kid again, and being able to tell stories from a naive, childlike place, and to experience things in a new way. So to be able to do that from a young age, role playing is definitely informing the music, definitely informing the world like this, because you've been storytelling.
That's true.
That's really great. Should we?
Rock some jams or something? So just to be clear what it is that we're going to be rocking, the music of Orchid is one big rock song and a bunch of orchestral stuff. None of that's going to get played tonight. I also do a thing called the Night Watchman, which is solo, full acoustic stuff. You're going to be hearing that, but I thought, thank you very much. I thought long and hard about what songs to play, and I wanted to play songs tonight that drew on, it not literally from the book Orchid, but drew on some of the same themes, the same vibe. So it's as you'll hopefully soon see. One thing I will ask, so we can get the mic set up, I think we're going to need to close that door, maybe a little hotter in here, but I'm going to